The donkey. Once upon a time, there lived a king and a queen who were rich and had everything they wanted, but no children. The queen thought over this day and night and said, "I am like a field on which nothing grows." At last, God gave her her wish, but when the child came into the world, it did not look like a human child, but was a little donkey. But the king said, "No, since God has sent him, he shall be my son and heir, and after my death sit on the royal throne and wear the kingly crown." The donkey, therefore, was brought up and grew bigger. His ears grew up beautifully high and straight. He was a happy donkey who jumped about and played and had an especial pleasure in music. So much so that he went to a celebrated musician and said, "Teach me your art, that I may play the lute as well as you do."
"Ah, little dear master, that would become very hard for you to do, for your fingers are certainly not suited to it, and are far too big. I'm afraid the strings would not last."
No excuses were of any use. The donkey was determined to play the lute. He was persevering and industrious, and at last learned to do it as well as the master himself. One day, the young prince went out walking, full of thought, and came to a well. He looked into it, and in the mirror-clear water saw his donkey's form. He was so distressed about it that he went out into the wide world, taking only one faithful companion. They travelled up and down, and at last they came to a kingdom where an old king reigned. Who had an only but wonderfully beautiful daughter.
"Here we will stay."
He knocked at the gate and cried,
"A guest is without open, that he may enter."
However, the gate was not opened, so he sat down, took his lute, and played it in the most delightful manner with his 2 forefeet. Then the doorkeeper opened his eyes most wonderfully wide and ran to the king and said,
"Outside the gate sits a young donkey, which plays the lute as well as an experienced master. Let the musician come to me."
When, however, a donkey came in, everyone began to laugh at the lute player. And now the donkey was asked to sit down and eat with the servants. He, however, was unwilling and said,
"I am no common stable donkey. I am a noble one." "If that's what you are, seat yourself with the men of war." "No, I will sit by the king."
The king smiled and said good-humouredly,
"Yes, it shall be as you wish, little donkey. Come here to me."
Then he asked,
"Little donkey, how does my daughter please you?"
The donkey turned his head towards her, looked at her, nodded and said,
"I like her very much. I have never seen anyone so beautiful as she." "Well then, you should sit next to her too." "That is exactly what I wish."
The donkey placed himself by her side, ate and drank, and knew how to behave himself daintily and cleanly. When the noble beast had stayed a long time at the king's court, he thought,
"What good does this all do to me? I still have to go home again."
Hanging his head sadly, he went to the king and asked for his dismissal. But the king had grown fond of him and said,
"Little donkey, what troubles you?" You look as sour as a jug of vinegar. I will give you whatever you want. Do you want gold? No. Do you want jewels and rich dress? No. Do you wish for half my kingdom? Indeed, no. If I did but know what would make thee content, would you have my pretty daughter as a wife? Ah, yes, I should indeed like her.
All at once he became quite merry and full of happiness, for that was exactly what he was wishing for. So a great and splendid wedding was held. In the evening, when the bride and bridegroom were led into their bedroom, the king wanted to know if the donkey would behave well, and ordered a servant to hide himself there. When they were both within the room, the bridegroom bolted the door, looked around, and as he believed they were quite alone, he suddenly threw off his donkey skin and stood there in the form of a handsome royal youth.
Now you see who I am, and see also that I am not unworthy of you.
Then the bride was glad, and she kissed him and loved him dearly. When the morning came, he jumped up, put on the animal's skin again, and no one could have guessed what kind of form was hidden beneath it. Soon came the old king.
Ah, is the little donkey merry? But surely you are sad that you have not got a proper man for your husband.
Oh no, dear father, I love him as well as if he were the handsomest in the world, and I will keep him as long as I live. The king was surprised, but the servant who had hidden himself came and revealed everything to him.
That cannot be true. Then watch for yourself the next night, and you will see it with your own eyes. But listen, dear king, if you were to take his skin away and throw it in the fire, he would be forced to show himself in his true shape. That is good advice.
At night, when they were asleep, he crept in, and when he got to the bed, he saw by the light of the moon a noble-looking youth lying there, and the skin lay stretched out on the ground. So he took it away and had a great fire lit outside, and threw the skin into it, and remained by it himself until it was all burnt to ashes. As, however, he was anxious to know how the robbed man would behave himself, he stayed awake the whole night and watched. When the youth had slept enough, he got up by the first light of the morning and wanted to put on the donkey's skin, but it was not to be found. On this he was alarmed and full of grief and anxiety, and said,
Now I shall have to try and escape.
But when he went out, there stood the king.
My son, where were you going in such a hurry? What do you have in mind? Stay here. You are such a handsome man. Do not go away from me. I will now give you half my kingdom, and after my death you shall have the whole of it. Then I hope that what begins so well may end well, and I will stay with you.
And the old man gave him half of the kingdom. In a year's time, when the king died, the youth had the whole kingdom. And after the death of his own father, he had another kingdom as well, and lived in all magnificence. We have just finished the story, The Donkey. Now let's answer some questions for fun. Who gave the queen the wish? God. What did the queen's son look like? A donkey. Who was married to the donkey? The king's daughter. Who threw the skin into the fire? The king.